Welcome to Taoists. The purpose of this recording is for educational and entertainment purposes only. None of this is financial advice.
All right. Welcome everyone to the Taoist podcast. We have a very exciting guest today, but before we get into that, I will remind you that the Taoist conference in Denver, DAOdenver.org for information, happening during ETH Denver, February 15th and 16th. Definitely come and join us in Denver. We'd love to see you in person. I'm your host, Igor Rogielinsky, and today I have with me Brian Peters. Brian is involved in a lot of things in the DAO space, including, as you probably know, Sobel, Bankless DAO, DAO Punks, the Polygon ecosystem, a lot of things. Welcome, Brian.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Pleasure. Now you're in Canada, is that correct?
Yeah, just outside the tech ecosystem in Waterloo, Ontario.
Awesome. The tech ecosystem, is it a hub of technology?
Yeah, it's kind of like the Silicon Valley of the North. There's a lot of startups per capita, so small, but lots of innovation's been happening here over the years. And home of the first ETH Global event, ETH Waterloo 2017. So, yeah.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. Tell us a little bit, if you don't mind, about your background. Where did you come from? Are you a technical person, non-technical? Give us a little bit of a backstory here.
Yeah. So I have a technical background, one that doesn't feel as relevant in Web3. Way back in the day, I was a mechanical engineer. And so I was involved in passenger rail vehicle procurements. And so I started working on technologies from at the start of the Industrial Revolution in the early portions of my career. And but yeah, I over the years, I got into engineering because I was interested in innovation. Innovation was obviously not happening in the rail industry, particularly in North America. And so I got drawn into the Waterloo region where I went to school and was watching how on the back of BlackBerry's success, the sort of tech ecosystem was starting up here. Got involved in some startups in the Web 2.0 scale up phase. So, post seed, through Series A, Series B, and was interested in things like product management, design. But my real fascination was actually in sort of the startup culture and noticing how as things scaled up, trust eroded in teams. We marched in the traditional hierarchies and the startup magic would disappear. And I was just obsessed with this. How do we actually work in that sort of fun, scrappy, trusting, fast-moving, style where there was decentralized leadership and power and flat, whatever you want to call it. How do you do that at scale? And that basically has been an obsession that, inevitably led me to decentralized autonomous organizations as they were described on the Ethereum website in 2017 and the DAO hack. And just ever since, obsessed with the space and particular around those decentralized organizing models.
Yeah. So you went down into the rabbit hole in 2017.
Yeah. So that ETH Waterloo hackathon and the opportunity to meet Joe Lubin and some of the others from the Consensus Mesh, as that was growing, there was an opportunity to embed there and take a look at sort of these proto-DAO behaviors because they were making decisions about how to fund all the various mesh spokes at Consensus. They were making those decisions together and growing this sort of remote first decentralized ecosystem in the early days on the back of that ICO boom. And that was a lot of fun to think about from the organizational behavior perspective and the types of things we like to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people do this sort of analogy to the .com start in the mid 90s and kind of, the whole trying to figure things out and learn new ways to put companies together and generate value from that. Do you see that parallel? Does this kind of look like that to you? Where would you say we are maybe in that sort of ecosystem? Are we in 1998 or Is Google just coming out, or are we maybe a little earlier or later, 2000? Where would you say we are?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really fun question, and like I do believe that there's some good opportunities to look at that previous model and ask like, where are we? I think I don't know for sure, but is the sort of straight answer. But one of the things that I really like from looking at that model is the fact that it wasn't just a technology shift. There were sort of organizing methods that shifted as well. Like prior to the sort of the internet and the .com move, everything was about, that world I used to live in, like passenger rail vehicles and rocket ships and factories. And in that world, the way in which they made decisions, built companies, and did projects was this sort of very, very top down and waterfall Gantt chart type project management. And when you had the .com thing happen, simultaneously a behavioral and organizing shift was happening. That was the agile movement and agile teams and lean startups. And so I do think that we have a lot of similarities to that phase, in that we have the technology of sort of blockchain, coming along with us at the same time as these DAOs and the behavioral shifts that we're seeing simultaneously. And so, yeah, where are we on that curve? I have no clue, but it's very clear that that one has done its S curve, and the new one is definitely on the vertical portion.
Yeah, absolutely. And minds are definitely shifting in terms of what the meaning is of a job or employment, or what career is. And you're certainly a great example of a Web3 sort of, let's call it the Web3 um, maybe career, let's say, where you're not involved in just one thing, you're involved in many things. You're involved in many DAOs. Do you have a count? Do you have any sense of how many there are?
Yeah, I mean, the Discord servers off the left tab of the screen of, or there's a lot of them, but the ones where I'm actively contributing, I think you listed off a number of them. Sort of Bankless Season 0 was the first, because when I saw that DAOs were more than just managing a protocol, and we're starting to get more social, media oriented like Bankless is, and there was a diverse set of people coming in, I just had to jump in. So Season 0 there, and then the next one was sort of the Polygon Ecosystem DAO. And soon in around that time period was, and so they were doing a grants program. So just thinking about the ops and governance and grants was really interesting to me. And City DAO, the original tweet went off early last year, and Scott was sort of enticing us to ask the question of, hey, now that we can incorporate or do an LLC effectively in Wyoming, let's try to buy some land. Let's try to marry these two worlds and create, tokenization of some of these, real world assets. And I was just fascinated by that. So City DAO did some design work for them in the early days and a part of the core team and on the multi-sig. And yeah, I mean, it's just one of these things where, like, you keep going. And then DAO Punks recently, because Cryptobushi and Sinjin, who I've loved the art that they were creating in the Bankless community and producing this art in the form of the DAO Punks NFT, and taking those funds and looking to do a grants program to help others come into this Web3 space and transition from part-time contributions to full-time contributions. Like, I love that. So I find I just kind of get pulled in now through organic connections to others, more recently reputable DAO, working on health and wellness. And it's just, DMs and people who are showing something that I think is going to have an impact in the ecosystem or in the world. And I get excited about that. I'm a wanderer now, as many of us are in this space.
And I think we all are, potentially one day, but maybe not too far down the line here, we'll kind of be these, nomads that we will bounce from project to project, providing value where we can, right? And at some point, that value may not be necessary anymore, and so we'll move on to something else. But this is one of the things for me as an entrepreneur for many years. There are so many things that I get passionate about at different times in my life, and maybe depending on what's going on in my life, but I can't really dedicate a serious amount of time to them because I'm usually very invested in one thing. Having a diversity of investment and having some liquidity of time, I think brings a different mindset to it. And maybe that's what people are going to start doing now that they have this opportunity to to buy a token, to invest in a DAO, and see where they can contribute, and then continuously take part in or step away from as necessary. So taking this back to where, let's say starting with Bankless. I mean, Bankless Nation is growing. It's a lot of attention. You've been involved with it for a while. How do you see your contributions there in terms of, are you a small cog in a very big wheel? Are you involved in it from a time to time basis? Just to explain to people, like, if they see themselves getting involved in DAOs, how do they fit into this organization?
Yeah, and I think, like, to your previous point, I think what DAOs are opening up is more ways to play the game. I often refer to the future of work as just the future of play, and because a lot of the mechanics are the same. And like, when previously work was like all about only one way to play, like, maybe, well, not one way, but very few. Like, you can go full-time employment, you can do the contracting, sole proprietor thing, or you can do the entrepreneur, founder type thing. And yeah, there might be some variations within those, but like, it really is not creating the ability to really mix and match and mess around with those. And I think DAOs open that up. And so I'd say, over the time period I've been contributing to Bankless, to your question, it's changed all the way along. In the early portions, it was, lurking some, ops guild, because I was interested in the ops and organization side of things, meetings. It quickly became trying a proposal in the forum, and it, kind of falling flat, but, finding some people who thought that topic was interesting. I early on joined a guild. The guild then started to, in season 1, require some local governance because it was getting treasury and it had its own multi-sig. And it was like, oh, I like that. That's why I showed up. So I started to lean into that as a governance coordinator, and it was a new role that was emerging, and helping lay down the guild governance. And then, I got involved from the design guild in doing some design work in some of the projects, and then became a core contributor to the bounty board. I'm now in the process of kind of, shifting out some of my design roles there to doing more of a bit of like go to market and like consultative stuff. And, my time and ebbs and flows, and my contributions change. And I'm no longer the governance coordinator in the design guild. Somebody else has been elected into that position. And I think, there really is just so many different ways to play. And that's only, a glimpse at some of the different ways, and the amounts of dedication versus smaller roles and part-time capacities that I've played along the seasons.
Right. Well, I'm going to attribute that quote to you. The future of work is the future of play. I really like that, because, the reality is that even today, one of the criticisms I get about blockchain is that, it's kind of like a big game. And I say, well, how is our fiat monetary system not a game? I mean, it's still the same thing, right? You're still playing to get money. And on top of that, you have this centralized government that can, or central bank that can change the rules on you at any point, right? And so it's like, okay, it's kind of a game too. But one of the things that people say is that, well, this can only grow to a certain size. I mean, how big can an organization get, still remain decentralized, and still remain efficient or effective? I mean, Bankless is pretty much there, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and I think they indicate a good sense of how it plays out. It becomes fractal, in a good way. Like, sure, a DAO that's on a single multi-sig and a single snapshot voting system, like, that kind of only scales to a certain point. Even a single Discord server, Bankless hit the channel maximum and had to start refactoring how they were like, how many channels they were consuming and how they were, so all these things do kind of have a limit. And I think what happened over time is Bankless has gone to this sub-DAO architecture, which many DAOs do. And then it's even also found some like projects that have become their own server, as they mature or as they, need their own space, like the DAO Punks NFT, which has an affiliation, to the Bankless DAO. And so I think that's a great example. I think there's over 20 multi-sigs, and governance at the project and guild level there, as well as the main multi-sig. And so, yeah, I think these things could theoretically, and if you add in DAO to DAO relationships, where you can get these
DAO relationships.
that joint venturing and token swaps and these new mechanics that we're starting to play with it, like get us collaborating without having to do the traditional icky centralized merger and acquisition where it's like diversity and then it's like Facebook buying everything up and owning the metaverse. Like, I think we're finding ways when you combine all those mechanics that are relatively new and we're playing with, like sub-DAOs and the DAO relationships, I think you can scale to some pretty incredible levels in that way and still maintain sufficient decentralization.
Yeah. Well, do you have any sense for what the total treasury amount that Bankless oversees? Any idea what that is?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know off the top of my head because I haven't been looking into the main multi-sig. And also Bankless as a sort of media and social DAO is more about motivating talent to create shared future creation. And so the end result is that they're mostly on the ERC20 token of Bank and creating off of the energy and at-risk contributions of the early contributors. And so in a sense, Bankless looks a little bit like a traditional venture that was in a bootstrap phase, where they're starting to see revenues and that treasury having holdings from the product, services, and ideas of the early days, versus the City DAO, right? That one I know kind of a little better. It's in the 7 to 8 million territory, and the reason is because it's an investment DAO. So they raise first off the NFTs, and then they go out and execute the vision of buying land and tokenizing it, and running governance experiments. And so in that case, the treasury is a little easier to quickly grok. It's a size.
Okay, well, I guess we could easily look up the market cap of Bank, which is 15.2 million right now. So, I mean, substantial, that's a substantial enterprise. The only thing that may be challenging to folks is, how do I get involved? I mean, let's say somebody wants to get into Bankless and wants to become a contributor, wants to see if they will thrive in Web3, or is it Bankless even the place to go? Do you maybe start out with something a little bit more of a smaller community where you can have a little bit more impact and then lend your skill set to Bankless?
I mean, I love that question. And I think, it's a little bit, sort of skill set and personal style dependent. But one of the reasons I like Bankless, and I mean, I'm biased, it was my starting point, but it's been a starting point for many others as well, that even from my own recommendations. And the reason is because a DAO like Bankless, Friends with Benefits, these social and media DAOs require a diverse set of skill sets. And so, unlike say a DeFi DAO, if I was really into DeFi protocols and, a Solidity smart contract developer or full stack developer, I might want to move a little closer to some of the protocols and DeFi plays. But with Bankless, you end up with, yes, it's a little overwhelming in terms of the onboarding, but they're a very welcoming community and there's a ton of different ways to play. So if you enjoy exploring and want to know that there's probably likely a spot for you if you're willing to do the exploration, then places like that are a safe starting point, I believe. Whereas if you have a very well-defined skill set that applies to perhaps one of the protocol or one of the investment DAOs, because you're like, hey, I'm an investor, I've got capital, I understand this game, I want to, and I love the idea of participating in this particular vertical. There's probably an investment DAO for you. And so, yeah, that would be my advice, is like, know how you want to play. But if you're not sure how you want to play, go into something big and diverse like Bankless, and just spend a little bit of time going through the onboarding and chatting with folks to find your spot.
Yeah, and just traverse through the ant farm to find your place. I mean, especially if you have a lot of relationships. I like the idea of being involved with a number of different DAOs, because if you bring something to the ecosystem, a relationship that maybe can be very beneficial to the DAO, but they don't have any inroads there necessarily on their own, you can become a very popular person very quickly, and be very, very well liked and well rewarded. So I like the idea of being involved with a number of different things, and also maybe a few small things, a few big things, right? So maybe you have some pet projects, but then you're also working on some larger things. One of the interesting things for me, though, is with, let's take City DAO, for example. So I'm able to go to OpenSea, see your portfolio on OpenSea, see a couple of the things that you have there, and see that you're a City DAO citizen. This changes the ecosystem in a lot of different ways. Are you okay with this? Are you okay with being doxxed and other people being able to see what you own?
It's really interesting. I decided to play without being, perfectly anon. Yeah, sure, I go by B Pete's, but I do podcasts like this with my camera on, and people know that I'm affiliated as one of the co-founders of Sobel. So, like, I think there's the option to play anon, and I think in some ways the next time I play around in this game, I probably will play anon. And so I feel like, the opportunity to play anon allows that to be a little less unnerving. And so I do recommend to folks, when they're first getting started, unless there's reasons, that you wish to play doxed or pseudo doxed, play anon at first. There's a lot less sort of risk. There's the opportunity to experiment. Akin to that gaming analogy, it's like building a character, and that's kind of fun. Right. But not being married to that character, and being able to take some risks and try some things that you maybe weren't as comfortable with when you're playing with your meat suit avatar. And so, right. and the one-time reputation associated with that, And so this is what I do. I think, to your question, yes, it can be a little unnerving, the degrees of transparency that exist. I do think there's some things that we need to do to get better at helping folks manage, selective disclosure and privacy and stuff like that. And I see folks working on things like decentralized identity and zero knowledge stuff. And I think, that's kind of nice. I'd prefer if, some portion of my DAO resume was not entirely on chain, for all to see, and I had a little more control over it, aka the self-sovereign sort of decentralized identity approach. But hey, we're not there yet. And I think this came with some substantial benefits, is like my last thought on this topic, is just, through that transparency, we can play anonymous, and with the protections that playing anonymous brings, whilst also being quite audible in our audited in our actions. And so, sure, there are still rugs and there's still all these types of things, but there's forensics on the transactions. If I claim I'm a City DAO citizen, you immediately check my ENS and see my OpenSea holdings, and I am or I'm not. And I think there's just something beautiful about the level of transparency in this space, and how it enhances trust, and allows us to collaborate at these scales. And this is something I adored about working with Bankless in the early days. They really were pushing how hard they wanted to be transparent as a DAO, and how decentralized and permissionless the participation was going to be. And I loved watching how we all had a bit of a visceral reaction when we were doing our first coordinate with one another in a small team where we knew who was giving who what. But once we got over that, we all knew where we stood. We all understood whether people were appreciating our contributions, and we immediately could make choices as to whether this was the right project for us. And we had a nice conversation about it. And I just think, yeah, there's just something beautiful and new that comes with the scary part.
Right, right. So yeah, one thing you mentioned is that the accountability that comes with knowing who someone is and knowing their history is important. But there are ways like zero knowledge proofs to be able to uh, attribute accountability without giving up information or personal information, or at least giving an individual sovereignty over who has what information, which is pretty interesting and powerful. Speaking of zero knowledge proofs, this is an area where we have a lot of layer 2 technology coming into play. And I want to get your thoughts on how this plays into things with regard to Ethereum as a platform, or even beyond Ethereum as a platform. You have a lot of newer layer ones that are out that haven't even begun to consider layer 2 and try to alleviate the need. But then, have we really figured out whether or not everything should happen on the mainnet?
Yeah, I mean, and this is an area where I do not profess, any degree of expertise, but I do have some sort of like, 10,000-foot level thoughts on it. And one of them is that, I mean, I remember back in 2017, sort of discussions around multi-chain. Most of it was layer 1, but there were already discussions around the scaling and the layer 2 and the sharding and the payment channels and various things that were being experimented with. And plasma stuff was big dialogue back in 2017. And during that time period, it became clear to me that it definitely was going to be multi-chain, and I think that that's becoming really clear, like much clearer, now. And the argument that there's just going to be sort of one chain that has all the gravity of like perhaps layer 2 solutions, and it's just that. Like I'm a huge fan of the Ethereum ecosystem and what it's been doing, over the years I've been participating in it. But I wouldn't sort of classify myself as an ETH maxi. I do believe that Ethereum and the layer 2 solutions that are being built around it, that it's going to have a strong gravity, and that there's going to be a lot of that sort of EVM compatible layer 2 stuff, and I think that's great. But I also think that there's a high probability, coming from the sort of like watching the original sort of .com and Web 2.0 space. It's not like it's all one solution when it comes to like servers and management of cloud infrastructure and these types of things. And I think we are probably, and it's a bad analogy, but I do think that there's a high probability that there is one solution or a handful of solutions that have really, really strong gravity at the L1 layer and lots of L2 that's working with them. And then there may be some specialty things that are happening, right? Because inevitably there's use cases. If we say that, this whole Web3 thing is going to eat the world and we're barely started, then we're going to encounter the specialty stuff along the way that the general purpose stuff is not going to pull off. And so I do anticipate that sort of multi-chain, but like some really, some L1 constellations, if you will.
Yeah, I was going to say satellites, but yeah, constellations is a good term. Yeah, and what's interesting is that whole debate. I don't know if it's really a debate, but it plays a role in that Ethereum. I mean, it's hard to argue that there's a platform out there, blockchain ecosystem, that gives you as big of an audience or as much functionality or interoperability as the EVM does, right? But the cost of mainnet transactions is very high, And the advent of layer twos really allows us to determine what is most important to us, right? And what we want to pay. And having the flexibility to move applications around is quite important. But you said it was a bad example. I don't think it was really a bad example or a bad analogy of the client server kind of ecosystem, because as we just saw, even within Ethereum, when we find out that AWS goes down, and then this, like, I don't remember what percentage it was, but a large percentage of Ethereum nodes go down. The reality is that, yeah, look, we thought we were decentralized, but here we're still kind of centralized, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, I appreciate the way you're sort of saying that, there's everything kind of seems to be around these trade-off, and then, like, it's we're not likely to find something that actually, like, is great at everything. That's why, like, that specialization thing and some really good generalist things, was part of my thesis. But yeah, I think also that's why I actually am a fan of the Ethereum side of things, is because they hold up certain things that they're really interested in doing, and they're recognizing the job's not done yet too, like, in a lot of ways. And I think the one you're calling attention to is that, like, we don't all run our own node, like, and
Yeah.
that is kind of the dream. And there's some great criticisms just recently that were about this idea that people don't like to run their own server, so they're not likely to want to run their own node. And, like, some great counterpoints from Dan Finley at the MetaMask team. I think it was Moxie, who put that one out. And then Dan Finley and Vitalik had some great rebuttals. And I think, we're early in the day. And I think what's important to me when I'm personally choosing an ecosystem that I want to build I'm very interested in what they're saying is important to them, and the legitimacy they've built through what they've already been doing relative to those things they declare are important, and that they're acknowledging that the job's not done, and it is definitely not done. If you were to say decentralization is the bar, and I think Moxie's recent writings make it really clear we got a ways to go.
Yeah, absolutely right. Well, with that, take me into your project of choice now, Sobel. You're wearing the sweatshirt, so that's clearly what you're working on today. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Sobel kind of birthed from our time in the consensus mesh, myself and fellow co-founders and teammates. And it came down to when the consensus mesh was rapidly growing, because I think it grew at about 200%, and went from, like, a handful to, like, well over 35 spokes funded in less than a year. And during that time period of rapid growth and decentralized decision making, everything was changing so fast that everyone couldn't get a clear picture of things. And because they didn't have traditional management, reporting lines in those early days of the consensus mesh, people start to ask questions like, who doing what? What does this even look like if we don't have a traditional org chart? I'm having trouble navigating. Yes, I could work on, multiple projects like Infura and MetaMask simultaneously, but I don't even know, who's currently doing what roles, and, like, what roles are available, within our ecosystem here. And so how do I onboard into this thing? Onboarding, just like in DAOs, like, the same problems were emerging. And so this is where Sobel incubated. And the very first thing we focused on was, we can't see ourselves. And so we're rapidly evolving, and we want to make better decisions as a decentralized team. But we can't even see where we're at currently. And therefore, how can we make decisions on where we're going? Like, if we're going to fund this project, is there some team already working on it that perhaps this pitch should collaborate with? Like, if someone new comes in, they want to find a spot to work, that has a high impact, who needs what skills to do what right now? And so what, job marketplace type thing. So we focused on that mapping thing at Sobel, was in a decentralized autonomous organization. If you don't have a clear picture, you can't make good decisions as an individual or as a collective, and you don't really harness the wisdom of the DAO. And so And eventually, if that becomes too much of a problem, it actually has a factor in the social trust that exists in the system, because we start to distrust. We might have tokens, there to help us, and the blockchain to help us with trust, but at the social layer zero, if we could call it that, we're starting to feel trust erode due to confusion and miscommunication, and that really affects collaboration. So mapping a decentralized autonomous organization was also what it was about in the early days. But as we got going, we got really interested in how we connect that map to all the protocols that are a part of DAO operations. And so we've in the early days, we did experiments with identity, with like sort of like decentralized payroll and, these types of things. Now those DAO tools and that DAO stack is becoming much more apparent. And so Sobel in 2022 is moving past like integration into the communications layer like Discord as it is today, and starting to add in connections into the treasury management, like the Gnosis Safe, Snapshot, because all these protocols are open. And so the goal for Sobel is to basically do what Zapperfi did to DeFi, where you get this nice dashboard of your entire portfolio, and could even do simple operations from the Zapperfi window, or jump off into the protocol and do your DeFi stuff there. But you get a nice clear picture of your whole thing. Sobel's kind of like going in the same direction. We start with a nice clear picture, but as we integrate into those protocols, we're starting to see what types of use cases would allow a DAO contributor to get a clear picture, get a feed of what's going on from all these different things, and then start to do simple things to move the ball forward, be it vote, be it sign a transaction, run payroll, through a protocol that's doing like a CSV airdrop, or launch a coordinate round based on who is in your Sobel team circle. These are the types of things we're talking about with all of others in the DAO tooling space. And we just get really excited about the collaboration amongst those. We concentrate on the front end and the view, and they concentrate on nice secure protocols that are running those transactions for those different DAO ops and governance things. So yeah.
Well, certainly a necessary tool. I mean, if you're leaning towards, or the world is evolving towards a decentralized organization, people are constantly looking for the structure, right? I mean, the first thing we look for in a traditional organization is the C-suite. Well, if there is no C-suite, then how do you know what the org looks like? Now, is it in its current stage, is Sobel something that you just plug into a Discord server and it'll scan the server and give you a map basically and say, okay, this is what things look like?
Yeah, so we there are certain things that are automatable, and we've automated some of them over the course of last year. So one is you can plug it in, install the Sobel Discord bot, and immediately populate a member directory based on all the role tags that are in the system. And you can even make decisions on whether they will be populated as a member, based on the role tags. And with Collabland, governing some of those role tags based on token holdings, you can basically say something like, all the people who are above this token threshold, Collabland already gave them this role tag. So therefore that will provision a user into the Sobel member directory as an editor, or as a read-only profile, or as an admin. And so being able to map those was where we started. Then we started to notice that teams were defining membership of different sort of sub-circles within the DAO using role tags in Discord. So we set it up so that you can map those to circles in Sobel and automate the membership, sort of fields in Sobel as well. But like a full-blown, sort of automated map, no, because Discord isn't really a one-to-one org map. And so the Sobel map can plug in and read information from there, but there's still sort of this wiki style element to Sobel, where you sort of need to draw the macro level of your structure, and adjust it as makes sense, per your house strategy.
Yeah, I mean, I love roles in Discord, and I feel like almost everything could or should be a role. Like, If you speak a certain language, like you speak Spanish or you speak Italian, well, you could have that role and go into that language channel. Can you get a little bit, is it possible, would you say, to go overboard with the roles?
Yeah, I mean, I think roles start, this is the thing where, we'd argue when you're first starting something up, Discord as org chart actually works. Channels, categories and channels give a semblance of structure, and these role tags, as you mentioned, you can use them for lots of different ways to show attributes. And to a savvy Discord user, they're reasonably queryable, in the sense that you can click on someone's avatar and see what roles they're holding. But at a certain scale, that gets hard to grok, and you just keep piling those on, and you can have like hundreds of role tags. And I think that granularity is great, in many ways. But I think one of the things that plugging that into Sobel helps you do is you actually get like an automated, Airtable Notion-esque member directory in Sobel, with the ability to filter and query for some of those attributes, and see a bit more of a visual map of in Sobel we have roles too, but they're much more specialized to the kind of like elected positions in DAOs, or coordinators or facilitators of a particular guild project work stream. And it sort of allows, the members may have been automated using the Discord role tag, but being able to call out specific roles that folks are taking a tour of duty in doing, I think is an important visual that helps you do as many crazy roles as you want in Discord, while still having something that can give you some sense making around that as you scale.
Right. So basically, it sounds like it's kind of like a metric system for Discord. It kind of gives you a report, and lets you know, who's taking part in your Discord, and potentially query that result set. So you don't have to necessarily go into every channel and see every conversation in order to get a sense of participation and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Because you hear about a particular project, and you maybe go to the Start Here channel for it in its category,
Right.
or channel, but like that's a long, or someone on it, you start asking them about it. It's a long process, and not very self-serve. If you're lucky, there's maybe a Notion page with some decent stuff about it. But like if you come into Sobel, you can very quickly self-serve on that. Plus, find often on the team profile, jumping off links into things like the GitHub repo they work from, the Notion page that they've run their meeting minutes from, and those types of things. Beyond though, like to your point, yes, we do the map of people, teams, and roles, but we also map high-level goals and milestones. So in the Polygon ecosystem DAO, Sobel is actually being used. Once a project is granted, you can see all the goals and milestones that they signed up to in receiving their grant, and how they're tracking and progressing. And in traditional organizations, that would have been like your executive Monday morning boardroom report, but like instead it's this dynamic live dashboard of how things are progressing. Sure, all the details might be down in the GitHub, in the Kanban board, but the high level summary is there for the entire DAO to see and quickly navigate to. And so that's another thing to kind of offer up.
Yeah, much better than a boring Monday morning meeting,
Yes.
especially when they don't even give you bagels. So it seems like you see this as obviously a very much needed thing within the DAO ecosystem, within the blockchain space. Would you say this is kind of one of the most important things that we need, is sort of visualization and understanding of what's going on in the space? Is that obviously things move very fast. You can have things escalate very quickly. Somebody announces that they want to uh, set up a DAO to buy Blockbuster, and all of a sudden you've got 10,000 community members, right? And it's like, okay, this just blew up really quick, but what does any of it really mean? Is that what's important, you think? One of the more important things within the ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, I do think anything that contributes to easily finding the knowledge you need to participate and make good decisions is very important when it's permissionless participation and decentralized governance. And so I think Sobel is a part of a balanced diet of things that'll do that for you. But I do think that, you know, in general, the DAO tooling ecosystem is pretty nascent. It's off to a great start, in my opinion, and but there's a lot that needs to be done to aggregate information, streamline the experience and workflows, and things are you know, sort of very fractured right now. So I have to work. I work with tab groups in my of the different DAOs I'm in, and multiple tabs of things that I use to operate in that DAO, be it the Gnosis safe, the snapshot, the forum, and I try to cluster them all together. But that's me trying to solve this problem of and I do all kinds of things to try and tune the notifications on a per app DApp experience perspective to see if I can get the right aggregate
mix,
if you will. But like, I can't do it, and I think solving that is extremely important to being able to participate, and definitely to unlock the ability to participate in multiple effectively. But I do think that there's also big gaps in the DAO tooling landscape that aren't so much about aggregation. And so in that case, I would say it's really important, I think, to solve the calendar coordination problem. I am so tired of let us meets and Spot telling me, when something's happening, and maybe trying to describe it to my personal calendar, plus sending a Calendly link when it's a one-on-one in a group DM, and, to set. And so I am really excited for the possibility of like Web3 calendar that's kind of like Calendly, but, using my ENS, and like that's just, and being able to aggregate multiple personal calendars into that thing. And do group, quick decisions as a group as to how we're going to coordinate to meet. So I think like that's just one example of like a massive gap that causes a lot of like, lost energy and angst in a DAO.
Friction, yeah.
So
yeah,
those like little ones like that all add up to something that just feels angsty when you're participating in the DAO. For all its benefits, it has these kind of paper cuts still.
Sure. Yeah. And we're definitely going to have to encounter those and figure those out as time goes on. I mean, if for the most part, it's very much I would call it a reckless space, in that, we're adopting tools sometimes that weren't really meant for the purposes that we're using them, like Discord to begin with, right? I mean, Discord's the primary tool, at least in my circles, that DAOs will use. And I put together, and I know I reached out to you about this, to put together a DAO Discord playbook, so that you can kind of have a sense for how to set things up. And you've been gracious with some recommendations for folks who are really good with that. But the reality is that Discord wasn't made for us. It was made for gamers, and it's great for that, and it's good for what we need, but it could be better.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's exactly it. In the sense of, to that calendar example I gave, we fill in the gaps with existing Web 2 tools, often that are very like generalized or close enough. And so to our earlier analogy, we were like, oh, the future of work is play. Then obviously a gamer communications platform is probably the best fit of all the communications platforms we have to choose from.
Right.
And so, that it kind of explains why we got there. But to your point, we're flexing something that wasn't built for this. And similarly in discourse, when we use that as a dominant forum solution for sort of pre-vote ready, proposal, marination and refinement, it's okay. But it's yet another thing that's not really a part of the stack. Notion, right? We tend to favor these really generalized things. I see a lot of Notion. I see a lot of like sometimes Google Docs and Google Forms and Google Spreadsheets and Typeform and Tally.so. Sure. And so like we're using a lot of those, and then we feel itchy about them in some way too, whether it's doxing an email that we don't really want to be even using email anyways, or it's not actually integrating into the stack properly.
Yeah, right. You're right. Yeah, like Airtables too, right? It's
Yeah.
these things that are built for a different ecosystem, for a Web 2 ecosystem. I like to think that Web 3, maybe Web 2 is very focused on the generalists, right? Very much focused on the general use case, whereas Web 3, if we have openness and everything is essentially built as an API, which I think that's how developers ought to approach Web3 tooling, is to think of it as an API. Well, then we can build our own use cases based on whatever our needs are. So, my use of a CRM tool or a finance tool like QuickBooks might be different than that of a CPA, right? I only need one account. I've got you know, one tax return to file. Meanwhile, he has 200. So being able to really build things in modular form, I think, is kind of important to Web3. Do you agree with that sentiment? Is that something you try and bring to your projects?
Yeah, I think that sort of modular, interoperable, open, ideally, community governed, like all these conversations that we're having around, like even the tension. So we talked about the tension with Discord, still classically a Web 2 thing pointed mostly at gaming. Then you have like OpenSea, right? That gets a lot of dialogue recently and a lot of flack. They created something awesome. It's a little more centralized than the community is desiring, perhaps around the governance. What gets whitelisted as a project, what gets dumped, as CityDAO had the experience of not being able to be listed in getting that blue check mark. And so, I think it kind of like results in this. I think there's going to be like Web3, native stuff that comes along and kind of delivers on most of that list, if not all of that list, kind of thing. And then there's going to be, I think there's going to be some Web2 plays that it'll be an incremental thing for them to just become more open, maybe DAOify over time as their community demands it, and like could make the switch. And then in the the sort of Web3 space, I imagine that there's going to be like all in one, easy to use on ramps, and then like very modular, interoperable. Combine the Legos in any combination a wizard wants to, or a massively scaled up DAO wants to. And so I think in akin to the concept of like there's Trello and then there's Jira, in terms of project management in the Web 2.0 space, there's likely to be these sort of like get started as a small DAO, all in one, but Web 3 centric plays. And then these like, diverse, modular, composable ecosystems of tools. And I think that's going to be awesome. And some of the Web 2 stuff might join that
Yeah.
diverse, composable
I mean,
ecosystem.
yeah, that's the logical transition. You just don't know, given their corporate governance that is in place right now. I mean, when you think of tools like Jira that started out as like really scrappy tools, and you could really see them becoming DAOs back in the day, but now that they're consumed by massive corporate entities, that's not necessarily likely. What
Yeah.
about the monetization of these tools? I mean, with Sobel specifically, how do you monetize something like Sobel, and how does the community find value? I mean, it's like the OpenSea example that you brought up, with like, okay, well, what's a fair, you know, price for an exchange to charge? What's a fair, or does that even matter?
Yeah, no, and I mean, and it's interesting, I love this question because I think, um, at the sort of protocol layer, which is where like the majority of the development's been in the early days of this Web3 side of things, like it sort of has this sort of protocol style business model that's emerged, which is like the protocol runs transactions in a trusted way. The trusted machine has a take rate to secure it, continue development. And over time, those protocols often mature to a point where it's advantageous to include the community in the governance of everything that's going on. And it's like, that's a business model I've seen. It's awesome. I love it. Sobel's a little bit different, and that I think we are looking a little bit as a front-endy plugging into all the protocols over time, sort of navigational dashboardy play, that we're sensing a need, and watching the DAOs we're working with want to purchase by streaming tokens to us, not unlike a tokenized SaaS model. And so we're looking right now at how we effectively play with that. So we've done some proposals through the governance frameworks of DAOs to agree to some token streams as an experiment. They're very receptive to this way of paying for a service like Sobel. And I think we're going to see more and more Web3 applications starting to look at their business model, being aligned in that way, or at least packaged in that way, because it's sensible. Here's a monthly fee for being able to run the fancy features of this aggregator or portal. And so I think there's something there. We're experimenting with it, and we're kind of excited because instead of collecting fiat through like the traditional buy pro tier $5 per user a month kind of model of the other way of doing things, in this model, we can take a native token as a Sobel team in that exchange and feel better tied together. So it's effectively a little bit, like we're receiving a token and holding that token in bank or in Matic or whatever it is that we agree to transact in. They can transact in stables if they wish, and we're just trying to figure out what that business model and pricing model looks like. But over time, that starts to accrue a diverse portfolio where we have skin in the game on our customers. And what I would like to see Sobel do as we mature as a play is decentralize ourselves and have that start to feel more like a swap, and have shared stake in each other with the folks that we're collaborating with out there and that are customers of Sobel as DAOs. And I get really excited about asking the question, what does Web3 software as a service look like with token streams? And so that's where we're at right now.
I think that's awesome, because really aligning with your customers, or I think customers is the wrong word. It's really
I know.
Right? Because if you're in alignment in what you're trying to accomplish, and just think about all of the successes of the space, or of the Web2 space, that have just been like Facebook, huge success. Who did they bring along for the ride? No one, right? And so all of their earliest partners, all of their earliest contributors, right? No one got to benefit from that massive success. And there's at some point inadvertently a shakeup, and you change everything, right? Because you're in a different class. And I think that that's not necessarily the right way to go about things, especially if there's a very high degree of failure. Then whoever's kind of helping out at the ground level should have the ability to scale with you if that's something that is feasible for them to do. And so that's what it sounds like Sobel is doing, is that basically it's giving opportunity, it's lowering risk for Web3 startups and DAOs, because now they can utilize this type of information to make informed decisions and to be able to govern better, without having to worry about it potentially being the expense that's going to sink them.
Yeah. So, because I love the idea that I want to align our success with their success. And so, and similarly, when we have conversations about this in terms of the value exchange, it's like most we have this Sobel, sort of unlimited free trial sort of plan for DAOs. And it's basically the idea is like, let's get started. We know that DAOs like to do retroactive rewards. So get into Sobel, start to get it going with your DAO. And when you start to, when we can get to that point where we have agreed to value exchange, we can get aligned via this token exchange. And I think that, that starts to kind of allow that alignment that was missing in the sort of the Web 2 space that creates that competitive acquire it all, try to do it all, like, versus no, we'll do our thing, and you guys will do your thing, and we'll collaborate, and we're not going to hold your data. And if there's another Sobel platform that someday soon that is better for certain types of DAOs, then there shouldn't be any cost of switching because you're running on the protocols, and
Right.
so you can switch across. And I think that challenges all of us to be better in this space. And and we don't have to M&A and take control. We can just swap tokens, play nice, but be competitive within our domain, and not try to land grab the whole map. And I love that
well,
world.
In terms of competition, that's an interesting thing that you bring up, because I often wonder about this and kind of go back and forth in my own mind about whether or not competition is such a good thing. I mean, certainly it is when it encourages multiple organizations to try and be better than each other and provide more value to the customer. But at the same time, I feel like one of the issues in our space and the issue in general in our world is that there are so many people who have the same objectives, but don't communicate, don't work together, don't collaborate, don't even know that each other exists. And they're trying to solve the same problem, many of them the same way, because our brains tend to work the same way. So many of us make the same mistakes over and over again that others have already made. And this for me is a problem, because I know as people flood the Web3 space, they're going to be looking at a lot of different opportunities. And many of those opportunities are just wasted resources, just like when, I don't want to bring up specific names of venture capitalists, but let's say venture capitalist firm A backs startup A, and then venture capitalist B backs startup B, and then venture capitalist C backs startup C. They're all doing the same thing. They're all very well funded, but it's kind of a pissing match, let's be honest.
Yeah.
So to what degree does it really is competition good, or to what degree do we need to do a better job of maybe indexing the work that we're doing so that we don't have 10 Sobels out there? Maybe 2 Sobels is good, but 10 is probably unnecessary.
Yeah, I mean, I really like this question, and due to the complexity of the space, I don't think there's a simplistic answer. I think it becomes one of those things where you kind of need the right balance. But like one thing that I know we got wrong in the old way that we were doing things was that the competition only happened at the sort of like macro, what was previously called platform level, like, and everything else is just like, feeding on the scraps. And there were only like 3 platforms that would win, like because the power law dynamics are kind of such that 3 to 5 are going to kind of have a decent spot, and everything else is going to be like a specialist, a smaller team, smaller style,
a niche solution.
Thank you. But I think that's problematic. I think that competition needs to exist, but I don't like this consolidation into a platform, single entity kind of thing. And so I think it's more like incredible competition within a narrow band. We have that, the DAO tooling sort of map, for example, and it has all the different, logos and the different categories that are in. Well, I imagine there's even subcategories within those categories as that map continues to grow and grow. And I love the idea of strong competition within that one spot. In the same way that I think it's great in the DeFi ecosystem, there's strong composition in loans, in liquidity, that is also starting to produce subcategories where there is strong competition there. But that they, relative to the larger ecosystem map, are composable and interoperable and open, and that they're not trying to hunt to own the whole map. They're recognizing that they actually kind of like got to work together and form those relationships through those other mediums that we're discussing, like token swaps and collaboration, et cetera, because they're taking on the old legacy system that was that attempt to consolidate. And so you got to be different and recognize that we're actually all working together, despite maybe being hyper competitive in our very narrow band. We're actually all collaborating together to not have the metaverse owned by Facebook and not have, liquidity owned by hedge funds.
Right.
Or three of them.
Yeah. So essentially, we're not competing as previously corporations did based on proprietary knowledge, trying to get a leg up by some insider mechanics. What we're doing is we're saying, well, maybe there's not one way to solve this problem, and maybe we don't know the best way to solve this problem. So let's try a couple of different things, and people can go to the camps that they think are the most successful. Yeah. But ultimately, we're doing it in an open way. And if it ends up such that, one way is the best way, I like to use roll-up technology as an example. There's ZK rollups, there's optimistic rollups, right? And so if it turns out that zero knowledge proofs is the hands down best way to go, then that's the way we're going to progress. And then everyone from the optimistic camp is going to come into the ZK camp, right? It'll be a clear decision, but it's not based on trying to get one over on the other guy. It's not based on trying to use some insider knowledge because, to your advantage or to your organization's advantage.
I love that, because I think that goes even deeper, like what you're describing there, which is that it's really about competition is a discovery mechanism, or markets or a discovery mechanism for an ideal fit or an ideal solution. And it's when we put our thumb on the scale and kind of mess with the ability for good competition to happen, which is consolidation and IP control and and litigation, that exists in the Web 2 world, or aggressive M&A, or starving out because you can't get capital, those kinds of, tactics, they don't help us arrive at the best solution for society. And so I'd like to see competition helping discover that, as you described.
Right, absolutely. Well, we're at an hour, so I want to start wrapping things up here, but I'd really like to know, because I do, I have seen that you're involved in a couple of punk projects, DAO punks, the cats,
Water cats,
apes, yeah. With all these things, I mean, there's obviously a big trend in the market space right now in terms of art NFTs, very silly, simple type JPEGs being assigned a lot of value. That's something that I haven't gotten into, but I want to get your perspective in terms of the whole, aping zombie punks. Is this necessary? I mean, is this a natural progression for our industry?
I think so. You'll notice by the ones that I hold in my portfolio that I have an affinity for the projects where the NFT was a building block to something slightly bigger that was playing with like collaboration in a new way. And so I found Stoner Cats interesting because Stoner Cats was trying to build a community funded Hollywood level production of an animated series, using, stars and world-class animators, and that they were going to progressively play with decentralization in the participation of like what's happening in the storyline. There's been guest appearances from DAO participants and competitions around, and there's been, two-way exchange and the transparency. And so I'm like, this is a new way to make TV happen, where fans can get in early and really participate in what's going on. And so those types of experiments got me excited, because it goes beyond the art and is more about art as
funding.
Art is a medium for not just funding, but also just creating a sense of shared values and community.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the same with the DAO punks, right? Because they progressed into trying to understand how we grant, do grants for other DAO punks to join the ecosystem and be punks too. And so the art leads the movement, and I love that kind of stuff that's happening. And I think NFTs have brought artists into something that can be so much more to art when we combine the mechanics of DAOs and DeFi treasuries, etc. But do I like the speculative movement of this, where it's just a JPEG and it's only posturing to be more than that and not really providing something? No, I'm not really a fan of that, unless it's saying this is just art, and art and collectibles are a thing, and appreciating art in its digital form and making sure that digital artists can be more self-sovereign in the presentation of their goods and direct access to market, then I'm like all for that. So I think there's kind of like two things at least there that are happening that I'm a big fan of. And like all things that have happened in this space, a whole bunch of stuff that happens in the early days too that isn't so great.
Right. Yeah, which makes sense. I mean, it's certainly if you're bringing it in for the purpose of creating an opportunity that didn't previously exist, you're funding something with your NFTs purchases, you're potentially even, as a mechanism to show your support for certain things, right? If you believe in Greenpeace or whatever, you can buy NFTs and show your support that way. It's a lot better than the silly tax forms that we get these days that outline our donation. But there's certainly a big component to it these days that is very much speculative, and just like you, I'm sure I'm a little bit concerned that it can, as the media likes to take salacious headlines and spin them, if this is a bubble and starts to burst for the speculators, it has some negative repercussions beyond that specific subcategory of NFTs.
I think your concern is real, and it's like, coming from those early days that I described as starting out in 2017 and watching the ICO craze, and then crypto winter on the other side of it. It's the same. We seem to follow these types of cycles as humans, and I wish we were like a little more moderate in the way we chose to play collectively, but the incentives are not really set up for that perfectly yet. And so yes, I think this will happen. Corrections will come, as they always do. And what I always love is that on the other side of those, there are people who have the perseverance to build great things through those. And despite the media telling the salacious story and the majority of the world, missing something beautiful that might be happening, those builders who stay on and build, I adore, because they're the ones who create the real tangible things on the other side that start to produce the media cycles and the participation that's much more healthy and exciting. So, yeah, we'll burst again, and heart goes to the builders who persevere through it.
Right. Well, that's great. I mean, I really appreciate you joining us for this chat. It's been a really enlightening conversation. I think the whole DAO's community will enjoy it. I'm disappointed that I won't get to see you in person in Denver, but perhaps the next Web3 meetup we'll get to meet in person.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, and I'm fingers crossed. Even though I got FOMO for the upcoming DAOist stuff at ETH Denver, I'm going to be hopefully at permissionless, and so yeah, maybe we'll meet up then or at some other point in the year. Thank you so much for having me on. This was an awesome conversation.
Absolutely. Well, I'm Igor Alinsky. That was Brian Peters, B Pete's, as he goes by on Discord, and your Twitter handle is B Peters.
I think it might be Brian Peets or something like
Brian
that.
Peets. Okay. Okay. Well, you could look at my Twitter and find his that way. But thanks again. Thanks for being with us, Taoists, and we'll look forward to the next podcast. I think we lost Eric, our producer.
Oh, well.
Well, it's okay. So we like to get a couple of minutes of just air time, just room noise, so that we can cancel that out in the recorded version. So that's good for that. But yeah, no, I think I think we're good. So let's jump off and be in touch on regular channels.
Thank you very much. We'll see you on Discord.
Sounds good. Take care.
Cheers.